A teenage boy had just passed his driving test and asked his dad if he could start using the family car. The dad said he'd make a deal with his son.
You bring your grades up to a B average, study your Bible a little, and get your hair cut, then we'll talk about the car.
The boy thought about this for a moment, decided he'd settle for the offer, and they agreed on it. After about 6 weeks, the dad said,
Son, you've brought your grades up, and I've observed that you've been studying your Bible. But I'm disappointed you haven't had your hair cut.
The boy said,
You know, Dad, I've been thinking about that, and I've noticed in my studies of the Bible that Samson had long hair, John the Baptist had long hair, Moses had long hair, and there's even strong evidence that Jesus had long hair.
His dad replied,
Did you also notice that they all walked everywhere they went?
A guy sits at a bar in a skyscraper restaurant high above the city. He slams a shot of tequila, goes over to the window, and jumps out. A guy sitting next to him can't believe what he just saw. He's even more surprised when, 10 minutes later, the same guy walks back into the bar and sits down next to him. The astonished onlooker says,
How did you do that? I just saw you jump out the window, and we're hundreds of feet above the ground.
The jumper responds, Well, it's simple. I slam a shot of tequila, and when I jump out the window, the tequila makes me slow down right before I hit the ground. Watch, I'll show you. He takes another shot, goes to the window, and jumps out again. The other guy runs to the window and watches as the guy falls to just above the sidewalk, slows down, and lands softly on his feet. A few minutes later, the jumper walks back into the bar and grabs a stool. The other guy is amazed, and he just has to try it too. So he orders a shot of tequila, slams it down, and jumps out the window. However, as he reaches the bottom, he doesn't slow down at all, and splat! The first guy, still sitting at the bar, orders another shot of tequila. The bartender shakes his head and says,
You know, you're really an hole when you're drunk, Superman.
A linguistics professor stands at the front of his English class. He clears his throat to begin his favorite part of the lecture, his glasses sliding down his nose.
In English,
He says, pausing for dramatic effect,
a double negative forms a positive. Now, in some languages, take Russian for example, a double negative still forms a negative. But
And here he stops, leaning forward slightly, as if revealing a great mystery.
there is no language, none at all, where a double positive can form a negative.
He looks around the room, expecting impressed silence, or, at the very least, a couple of nodding heads. The students, though, remain mostly still, except for a few confused expressions. Just as the professor is about to continue, an inaudible voice from the back of the room breaks the moment, and the students begin to chuckle.
Excuse me, young man,
Says the professor as he glances at the student in the back of the room.
did you have a comment? How about sharing it with the rest of the class,
The teen, leaning back in his chair, replies,
I said, Yeah, right.
It got crowded in heaven, so for one day it was decided only to accept people who had really had a bad day on the day they died. St. Peter was standing at the pearly gates and said to the first man,
Tell me about the day you died.
The man said, Oh, it was awful. I was sure my wife was having an affair, so I came home early to catch her with him. I searched all over the apartment, but couldn't find him anywhere. So I went out onto the balcony of our 25th floor apartment and found this man hanging over the edge by his fingertips. I went inside, got a hammer, and started hitting his hands. He fell, but landed in some bushes. So I grabbed a hold of my refrigerator and pushed it over the balcony and crushed him. However, the strain of the act gave me a heart attack and I died. St. Peter couldn't deny that this was a pretty bad day, and since it was a crime of passion, he let the man in. St. Peter then asked the next man in line about the day he had.
Well, sir, it was awful,
Said the second man.
I was doing aerobics on the balcony of my 26th floor apartment when I twisted my ankle and slipped over the edge. I managed to grab the balcony of the apartment below, but some maniac came out and started pounding on my fingers with a hammer. Luckily, I landed in some bushes. But then the guy dropped a refrigerator on me.
St. Peter, again, couldn't deny that this was a pretty bad day, and since he was innocent, he let the man in.
Tell me about the day you died,
St. Peter said to the third man in line. Okay, picture this. I'm naked, hiding inside this refrigerator. Two young boys are fishing at their secret fishing spot, a hidden pond way off the beaten path. Suddenly, the sound of a twig snapping breaks the peaceful silence, and before they can figure out what's happening, out bursts the game warden. Without a moment's hesitation, one of the boys drops his fishing rod like it's on fire and takes off into the woods. He's darting through trees, leaping over fallen logs, and dodging branches as if his pants are filled with hornets. The game warden, not to be outdone, barrels after him, huffing and puffing, desperately trying to keep up. The chase seems to go on forever, with the warden shouting,
You can't outrun me, boy!
but the boy just keeps running, grinning to himself because he knows these woods like the back of his hand. After a solid half mile, the boy skids to a stop, bends over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. The warden comes stumbling up behind him, panting like he just ran a marathon.
All right, boy.
The warden manages between gasps.
Let's see your fishing license.
The boy, still catching his breath, reaches into his pocket, pulls out a wallet, and hands over a perfectly valid fishing license. The warden blinks, looks at the license, looks at the boy, and then back at the license.
Son,
Says the warden, shaking his head in disbelief.
you must be about as dumb as a box of rocks. You've got a valid fishing license. Why'd you run from me?
The boy shrugs casually.
Well, sir, my friend back there ain't got one.
A middle-aged couple have just finished having lunch together in the kitchen. The husband, now feeling the heaviness of his meal, heads straight for the couch. Just as he's about to lie down, his wife's voice cuts through the air like a whip.
Oh, no, you don't!
She barks from the kitchen doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest.
The lawn looks like a jungle out there! Get off your lazy butt and mow the lawn!
The husband, already half in a daze from the food and the thought of a nap, snaps back. Just give me 20 minutes. I'll get to it after my nap. The husband stubbornly eases himself down on the couch, his body sinking into the cushions. He kicks off his shoes, removes his glasses, and places them on the coffee table with a sigh of exaggerated relief. The wife knows that 20 minutes really means 2 hours, and when he wakes up, he'll just have another excuse not to mow the lawn. So she decides to take another approach.
You know, honey,
She begins, her voice no longer sharp but gentle.
without your glasses, you look just like the same handsome young man I married all those years ago.
Well, says the husband, still desperate to get some shut-eye, without my glasses, you still look pretty good too. Little Johnny is in the backyard digging away with a small rusty shovel that looks like it's been through 100 backyard adventures. The midday sun beats down on him, but he's determined, filling in a hole that's nearly as deep as his little arms can reach. Just as he's tamping down the dirt, his nosy neighbor, old Mr. Thompson, decides that this is the perfect time to take a peek over the fence. Mr. Thompson leans over with a curious smile.
Hey there,
there, Johnny, he calls out in his usual overly friendly voice. What you doing there? Johnny, with a face that's red and sweaty, barely looks up.
My goldfish died,
He says, his voice wobbling with sorrow. After giving a sniffle and wiping his nose on his sleeve, he continues.
so, I'm giving him a proper burial.
Mr. Thompson tilts his head in confusion. He peers down at the size of the hole Johnny's just filled. But, Johnny, he says with a puzzled frown, isn't that an awfully big hole for a goldfish? Johnny pats down the last mound of dirt like he's putting the final touches on a masterpiece. He then looks up at Mr. Thompson with a dramatic sigh and says,
Well, that's because he's inside your cat.
A woman strolls into a small, cozy restaurant in the heart of a southern town. She finds a corner booth and settles in. Craving something crispy and delicious, she orders a plate of fried chicken. Eager to eat, she digs in a little too fast. Halfway through a particularly big bite, she feels something sharp catch in her throat. A chicken bone! Her eyes widen as she starts to choke, her hands flailing around as she tries to signal for help. At the next booth, Bobby and Billy Ray, two local country boys, are leisurely sipping their sweet tea discussing last night's fishing trip. Suddenly, they notice the commotion from the corner of their eyes. Without a second thought, they jump into action. Bobby nudges Billy Ray, and they both get up, shuffling over to the woman. Bobby, in his infinite wisdom, or so he thinks, drops his coveralls to his knees and bends over, positioning himself right in front of the choking woman. To everyone's surprise, Billy Ray takes his cue and starts licking Bobby's bare butt. The woman's eyes widen in shock, and her face twists in utter disgust at the surreal scene before her. In an overwhelming wave of nausea, she suddenly vomits, dislodging the chicken bone from her throat. Gasping for breath, but relieved to be alive, she wipes her mouth, still in disbelief at what just happened. Bobby, ever so casual, pulls his coveralls back up and turns to Billy Ray with a grin.
You was right, Billy Ray.
He says as he pats him on the back.
That hind lick maneuver works every time.